Zeal.
Hey guys, it's EXMaster, and I'm here with my next feature, a semi-collaboration between myself and G Black, where we look at the first two games in Triangle Service's Zeal series of shooters, Deltazeal and 12Zeal. Deltazeal is a game that is... Wait, who is this guy? This is a rather advanced enemy for the first stage. Believe me, this doesn't usually happen when you first start playing this game. Anyway, to get the full experience of our double feature, make sure you check out G Black's video on 12Zeal, released concurrently with this. Deltazeal appears to be your traditional vertical militaristic shmup, and for the most part that's true, but it does have a special gameplay mechanic that I'll introduce. Many of the stages have branching paths, which are triggered by certain conditions, leading to a randomization style element to the game. What you're seeing here is an extended version of Stage 1, with all the different enemy permutations that I know of. Chances are, especially if you're to pick up and play Deltazeal for the first time, you probably won't see all of this happen, and your run of Stage 1 will be much shorter than this. In general, killing as many enemies as fast as possible will get you the most permutations of the stage. Though that's not set in stone, I'm not entirely sure how some of the triggers work. In fact, when I was practicing the 1 credit clear run of this game, that mini-boss like enemy you saw at the beginning only showed up in a few playthroughs. As expected, the first boss of the game, named the Transport Imitation, won't put up much of a challenge, so we'll get through this pretty quickly. There are two primary ways to score in Deltazeal. Aside from the obvious of shooting down enemies, you can also collect the medals that they leave behind once they are defeated. Collecting these medals in succession will be worth an increasing amount of points until they max out at 1,000 points each. However, sustaining this medal chain requires you to collect the medals before they fall off the screen, and based on the speed that they fall at, they can be very difficult to keep up. As I'm focusing on survival in this run, I don't often worry about maintaining my medal chain, but it's an important scoring aspect if you wish to achieve a high score. Speaking of scoring, killing his enemies fast will get you into an additional section of the stage pretty consistently. A train sequence that pretty much doubles the length of this stage and makes it easy to max out a medal chain going into the boss. I ended up skipping it because I want to hurry up and get to the boss anyway. The Stage 2 boss, Wild Tank, puts up a little bit more of a fight than the Stage 1 boss, so you have to be a bit more careful fighting them. With repetition though, it should still be a fairly easy fight. If you're an observant viewer, you may have noticed the A in front of Stage 3. This is because there's a B-side variant to Stage 3, which is a totally different stage from 3A. The conditions that determine what stage you'll end up on are simple. In the previous stage after you beat the boss, if you're on the left side of the screen, you'll end up on the A side, but if you're on the right side of the screen, you'll end up in Stage 3B. By the way, this will also happen again for Stage 5. I'll mention that when we get to that point later on. For my 1cc run, I decided to focus on getting through Stage 3A, chiefly because it's shorter and, in my opinion, easier than Stage 3B. But also because of this funky music that plays in the background. The soundtrack to Deltazeal, composed by Hiroshi Tanabe under the pseudonym Naoto, can be pretty eccentric at times. Maybe it's an acquired taste, but it's one I happen to have because I quite appreciate this type of music. Now that we've gotten into the meatier parts of this game, let me take some time to explain some of the basic gameplay mechanics. Your ship, the Siren, has 3 different types of primary attacks, as seen by the instructional card on the left side of the screen. Red for wide, green for missile, and blue for laser. Power-up icons will appear and cycle through these 3 colors. The color you pick up will be added to the 10-slot power bar on the bottom right of the screen in my case, in the first in, last out basis. The power of each shot type is determined by how many colors of it you have allocated in the power bar, so you can focus on a combination or one particular type as needed. You also have a finite stock of the shim-up staple screen-clearing bombs that you can use, and the black hole shot as indicated by the instruction card. I'll go into what that does and how to use it a bit later in the commentary. The third boss, Ray, has multiple sections of combining parts. He starts to introduce some tighter bullet patterns to dodge, but for the most part you just have to focus on dodging what's coming directly at you, while taking out his most dangerous installment shooting at you quickly. Fun fact, this was originally meant to be Stage 1. If you play this stage in Score Attack, you'll see an extended sequence where your ship takes off from a submarine. This is the very same sequence I used at the start of this video during the intro. Variant paths of this stage are triggered by the alternate watercolors as you can see here, although I don't successfully trigger all of them during this run. For the most part, this first half of the stage is pretty easy going. You just have to watch out for any stray shots that may hit you, something that will become increasingly more common as the game progresses. This is probably the most difficult section of this stage, I'd say, just because of the way the submarines appear and shoot at you. Almost got hit there, and I'm being very careful about where I position myself, just because of those bullet trails. It's very easy to get caught up in a situation you can't get out of. Let me circle back into explaining the black hole shot now. By holding down the fire button, you can charge up the shot and deploy it by releasing it. But there's a prerequisite to using it, indicated by the tiny green font above the power status indicator. The flashing OK means the shot can be deployed, and the number determines how long the shot will last on screen before it disappears, up to 999. That number needs to be at 56 at least in order for the shot to be deployed. And while it's on screen, it'll cancel out any bullets and convert them into medals of the highest chain that you have, perpetually making it an important tool for scoring. I primarily use it for defensive purposes though during boss battles, as seen previously. Speaking of boss battles, the fourth boss, MH Pirate, pretty similar to the third boss with all its multiple sections, and a pretty similar strategy to beat it. That was the first time I used a bomb, which is intentional. I'll touch upon that a bit more later as well. As mentioned earlier, there's an A-B split on stage 5. This time I chose the B side. Continue my playthrough. During my original practice runs, I was training on the A side of stage 5, but late into the process, I decided to switch over to stage 5B. This is because I discovered I would have an easier time getting through the boss of stage 5B unscathed, as you'll see later. They're both fairly difficult stages, however, because we're coming upon the back half of the game. This is a stage where you really have to concentrate on what's on screen relative to your ship position due to those tank enemies. If you aren't paying attention, it's very easy to eat it and lose a life from a stray bullet that suddenly hits you from a camouflaged enemy. So going into the final stage, I initiated a strategy shift. If you manage to fill up the power bar with the same type of color, you'll greatly power up the shot type attached to that color. I chose to do this for the wide shot going forward because in my opinion, it's the best shot type in the game overall. Especially because there's so many enemies here that just flank you from the sides. As for the other shot types, the laser is limited by the fact that it only fires directly in front of you, although it is powerful. If you manage to fully power up the missiles, they are very strong, but they are much weaker in lesser form, and you can't control what enemies they target. There's a scoring incentive to having a fully powered up shot type. Also, since if you collect the same color, you'll get a significant point bonus going forward. I don't concentrate on this too much, however, because it can be a distraction to focus on the rotating colors to maintain your shot type, on top of everything else that's going on. Also, if you're relying on having a fully powered up shot type, it's not good if you accidentally collect the wrong color. By the way, in case you were wondering what increases that black hole shot number I mentioned earlier, well, that comes from it destroying enemies. They're hard to see unless you're really looking, but each enemy you destroy releases pixelated particles your ship can pick up and add to the total. The stage 5 boss, Great Twin Blade, is pretty powerful. There's an easy way to counter him. It'll attack you aggressively if you let it, but if you're equally aggressive, you can stop a lot of attacks. And it doesn't have a lot of stamina, so that aggressiveness will bring it down pretty quickly. Stage 6 is like an interlude which bridges the gap between the things that came before it and the final stage. It follows the pattern of a classic trope in shmups. Terrant, the boss of Stage 6, is the big battleship that flew by earlier, and you spend much of the stage dismantling it piece by piece. This is another stage which requires focus. Just because of the number of turrets that fire directly at you, it can catch you off guard easily if you aren't paying attention. Generally, I have to say the most difficult thing about completing the Deltazeal one credit clear was that you get no extends at any point during the game. That means you only have 3 lives to complete the entire game. With such a low threshold for the amount of mistakes you can make, that meant a lot of restarting during these later stages. Using a bomb there because there's a lot of stuff that can trip you up. Better to take it all out. My strategy with bombs was to get good enough at the game to avoid using them in the early stages, accumulating more of them to use for these later parts. This is actually a risky strategy because you can accumulate up to 6 bombs, but if you die, your bomb stock resets back to the default 2. You don't get any additional score bonuses for having a bomb stock. So it's best to get in the habit of using them frequently, I would say, and avoid hoarding them. Also, when you lose a life, your power bar reverts to having the default 3 red colors. This isn't exactly a death sentence as the game will spawn enough power-ups for you to recover adequately. But still, you want to avoid dying in this game because it is such a huge penalty to do so. Thankfully, your black hole shot count doesn't reset, so at least there's that. The difficult parts of this stage are pretty much done, so we just have to take out this top installment here. At last we've reached the final stage, where the enemy throws everything it has at us. If this game has a story, I don't actually know what that story is, as inconsequential as it may be. The unofficial name of the player ship, the boss names, and some vague stuff about methane hydrate and undersea city civilizations was the most information I was able to get from my research. Regardless, this will be a pretty long stage with a lot being thrown at you. I'm taking these guys out early so they don't cause any trouble. When you do that, they just float away. This is the most difficult section of the stage, I think. It's one of the rare times I use the black hole shot outside of a boss to give myself some extra cover. You really gotta watch out for those smaller ships because they move quick and they track you. If you don't take them out right away, they can easily hunt you down and kill you. They're very good at flanking, so it's best to cover your sides. Though Deltazeal was actually first released back in the year 2002 under a different name, G-Stream 2020, by a different company, Oriental Soft. The programmer of G-Stream 2020, Toshiaki Fujino, would go on to create the company Triangle Service after this. The first game he released under the Triangle Service name would be called 12 Stag, later known as Deltazeal. I first encountered this game back on the Xbox 360, where G-Stream 2020, now rebranded as Deltazeal, was packaged along with Deltazeal in the release called Shooting Love 10th Anniversary. I took advantage of it being region-free to import it from Japan, along with many other Xbox 360 release shmups. 2 years later, Deltazeal and other Triangle Service shmups were released on PC via the Steam platform. As of this recording, the most recent release of Deltazeal was a port for the Nintendo Switch that just came out last year in 2023. Nowadays, the Steam version and the Switch version of this game are the most accessible versions to play, and they aren't actually different from each other from a gameplay standpoint. The Switch version has a slight edge though, as it features a commentary from Triangle Service president and programmer Fujino. So if you're into behind the scenes stuff about how the game was made, it can't be missed. Also, it contains a CRT filter which is actually usable for visibility purposes. Modern versions may have a visibility problem when it comes to seeing bullets, and Fujino will explain why that is in the commentary. I actually played on the Switch version and used the CRT filter when I was doing most of my practice runs, but I switched over to the Steam version, which is what you see now, just for ease of recording. At the end of the day, you can't go wrong with either version, so just pick the one on the platform you prefer. Here we're at the final stretch of the game, so there'll be an extended last boss sequence here. My general goal here was to finish these sections off as quickly as possible. Made a risky maneuver there which resulted in that near miss. I really want to take this installment out quickly because if you don't, there'll be an additional section that comes out from the top, which will make this part much harder. But I get to skip that entirely, and I just have to worry about dodging these lingering orbs shooting these shots at me. And now here comes the mysterious final enemy, Knife Lost. Again, I'm trying to do this quick before it overwhelms me, so I'm being cavalier with bomb usage. Just gotta hit these turrets and narrowly dodge out of the way. Oh, really? How lame. That stung, but it's okay because Knife Lost. Doesn't have anything left after that. And we're done here. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to watch G Black's Deltazeal video to get the full experience of our double feature. I'm EXMaster, and I'll see you next time.